And welcome to another episode of MSTR Mondays. I no longer call it MicroStrategy Mondays. I was thinking about should I rebrand it to just the Stalker symbol, and it makes sense because MicroStrategy has changed its name from MicroStrategy to just strategy. So now, welcome to MSTR Mondays. It's Monday. I try every Monday to get what I consider the smartest people analyzing strategy as an investment together on this show to have some of my own questions answered and just pick the brains of some of the things that I consider really important in looking at strategy as an investment, and just fellow people that I'm excited about this investment opportunity with. And I would like to start out today just by saying that strategy now holds 478,740 Bitcoin. Their diluted MNAV is 2.07, which means that strategy, and this is one parameter that I personally find important. I know not everyone does. There's still a lot of discussion back and forth on how best to value strategy. And that's, I think, a really important and interesting discussion. But it puts strategy at a market cap of 991,000 Bitcoin. Personally, I do believe they'll be able to eventually accumulate 2.1. Just a reference to the 21 million Bitcoin, 2.1 million Bitcoin. So I definitely still see lots of upside here. I am happy and honored to have a big part of MSTR True North on the call tonight. We have Adrian, Soleil, Grain of Salt, Tim, Dan, and Jeff, the Quant Father. So guys, just all of you, welcome and thanks for being here, and thanks for coming and talking strategy with me. How are you all?
Good.
Happy to be here.
Good. Thanks for having us, Anders. Super fun.
Yeah. Awesome. What do you guys find interesting right now in terms of strategy? We had the rebranding last month. Now it seems that after the earnings call, strategy can now yet again buy Bitcoin as they did. They announced more than 7,000 this morning. So we're back to stacking Bitcoin at a relatively nice and aggressive pace. What we're also seeing is that the ATM is getting a little bit of a break, and he's been using the funds from the preferred stock. Any comments on that and your expectations for using more debt in Q1 than the ATM, the equity issuance?
I mean, a lot of exciting things going on, right? Over $500 million purchase from the strike offering, a couple $100 million from the ATM. There's only $4.1 billion of the ATM remaining, which is exciting. And the fact that they've, raised $16 billion of capital in just a short period is pretty astonishing. And one thing that's just kind of dawned on me today that I think is just a crazy statistic: the fact that they could buy $742 million of anything in a week and close on it and be done and walk away is pretty astonishing. Like, I don't know if anybody's just bought a piece of real estate, but like, if you were to buy a $500 million piece of real estate, you're not buying it in a week. It's taking forever to do due diligence and, all of these things. And now you have this new asset class where you can buy something that's $500 million, $1 billion. You could buy $1 billion of something in a single week, in a day. And that's just an astonishing statistic that I find incredibly appealing in large scale finance. So I'll stop there. Take it over.
Yeah, and even if like if Tesla did an offering, and they said, oh, okay, I want to build a new factory somewhere. It's going to take years. I mean, they do it quicker than anybody, but it's still going to take years for them to get that return on that investment. And strategy just immediately gets the value within a week. You're seeing more dots on the ticker. It's insane how quickly the investors are rewarded.
Well, that's the power. Oh, go ahead.
You could see it. You could see the strategy buys weekly, which is incredibly appealing as well. I mean, like any cash flow that comes in the door, they're buying it weekly and they're announcing it to their investors weekly. So you have the ability to understand and potentially value the company much faster and quicker than any other equity in the entire market, which is super appealing. Go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah. So that's the power of Bitcoin, right? It's instant. You can settle it. It's on the balance sheet, and you can see the immediate results of having on your balance sheet far quicker than real estate, far quicker than any other asset class, which is why a lot of us, are so bullish on Bitcoin or so bullish on MicroStrategy. I think that what we're seeing right now, especially with the strike offering, is that Bitcoin's a golden apple, and Saylor's found a way to get multiple bites out of it, right? He's turned his stock and he's weaponizing the volatility. He's got all these different offerings. He's got the convertible bonds. He's got the ATM. And in the future, when they start leveraging their Bitcoin to start getting yield, that's going to be another layer to the puzzle of volatility. And I really think that the best is yet to come for strategy. I really think that a lot of the heartburn that people have over ATM and why is he doing the converts and wondering should I invest in Strike, should I not invest in Strike? I think all of that's going to be seen as rather quaint in the years to come when they do larger offerings, when they do larger converts, when they have more offerings and different layers of volatility that they can bring to the market. So seeing where they started in 2020 and the skepticism that existed and seeing where they are right now, and how much they've scaled this thing, I couldn't be more pleased, honestly.
I think you make a good point. The idea of opportunistic, they've been very opportunistic, and the strategies evolved as the Bitcoin ecosystems evolved. So it's tough for anyone to predict exactly where we'll be in the future. And what we've determined or what we've witnessed is that, Michael Saylor at the helm and the MicroStrategy or the strategy team has been able to capitalize on new developments and the volatility itself, right? I don't think they would have necessarily thought of volatility as a product when they began purchasing Bitcoin. It was more a defensive capital preservation strategy that turned into a volatility monetization strategy, right? That was not planned at the beginning. And so that's evolved. And the next step of the strategy seems like it will evolve to something that we're not yet thinking of, but I guess we're hinting at.
Yeah, and the level of transparency with the strategy.com website now, right? All the Ponzi talkers, what are they gonna bring up now? Like, we have a company that has literally shown its playbook and is now showing all of its metrics about the plan and how it's working or how it's being leveraged to the market openly, transparently, no guesswork. There's nothing. They're putting it all out there.
How about them apples? How about them apples? Every time, just how about them apples? And it's like literally from the website. How about them apples?
Yeah, a lot of us were doing all this analysis already, right? So now the fact that we can just, whenever someone is trolling us in the comments, we can just take a screenshot and just be like, just enjoy that and read that and see what they're doing, I think is huge. And someone said something that I wish I had copied the post, but he was saying how Saylor is listening to investors, which we all agree with. And he was saying how he's probably thinking of the best way for each investor class to get the most bang for their buck. And he brought up an example of the reason why they're not doing a dividend is perhaps that makes options more likely to be your covered calls more likely to be called away near expiry if a company is giving a dividend versus a company that does not. And all the different ways that Saylor could be actually listening and thinking about the investors and all the different groups that come to MicroStrategy that are leveraging the volatility, trying to get return on their investment. So there's just many layers to this thing, and there's only going to be more as we go forward.
Right. I want to say also, just Soleil, Tim, and Grain, you feel free to jump in when you have something you want to add. But also, I think what we all probably find really interesting, or I certainly do, is that new third leg of fundraising that Saylor is standing on now, the preferred stock, and they only just listed. And I saw someone tweet that it went up from $80 to $91. So there is the at the market equity issuance, which is super accretive. Then there is the convertible bonds, which are even more accretive. And now also the preferred stock, where he can run an ATM straight on the strike stock, and therefore also raise more funds. And that is supposedly, or not supposedly, that is the most accretive of the three main tools now, and we'll see what come in the future, of course. Any expectations from any of you in terms of, or do we just need a few more weeks to see what happens in terms of how much he can use the the preferred stock, the Strike, that's the ticker symbol, to raise more funds. I mean, if the price now is starting to run up on that preferred stock, ticker symbol STRK, that means there is a demand. Now the dividend is getting back closer to the 8% that it is at par at $100. But if the price is going up on the stock, there must be a demand, and he'll be able to sell ATM into that demand and do the most accretive fundraising, as I understand. What do you guys say?
I mean, I think Ben talks a lot about this point where they're able to shift the ATM usage over to the preferred stock, which puts less of a drag on the performance of the MSTR common stock, and then trickle in the MSTR common stock ATM to pay out the dividend, which makes complete sense. I do think in the narrative of the Class A ATM has been detrimental. And so I think this kind of shift, if maybe during the next earnings or in a post or something, they mention this strategy, it'll really like bolster the sentiment regarding ATM usage in Class A, because I think most people aren't thinking about the preferred stock ATM. It's not even on their radar. And when Ben puts it into words, it's really helpful and I think exciting for a lot of people holding Class A shares.
Anything Ben puts into words, his mini essays, I think are very, very well liked for sure. Small PhDs each time. What about the rest of you? Any thoughts?
Just as an FYI, I don't think Strike has filed for an ATM, so I wouldn't. I don't think that exists yet. They have the ability to do that. They have to file for it. So I wouldn't anticipate like any future ATM is just going into the Strike offering. So just for clarification, and a couple other things.
Great point.
Like Strike isn't even available on Robinhood yet. It's not even, you can't even Google it yet on Yahoo Finance. It hasn't even hit these other brokerage houses. Like I think you can, like Fidelity, I can see it on my Fidelity, but I can't see it on these other potential apps. So I think we could see price continue to run once it hits some of these other brokerage houses as well on the Strike offering, which will be interesting to follow along. Just another future product.
Yeah, and on that note about the vol, I saw someone tweeting today or posting on X that it released the volatility that is Strategy's moat. But also, if we have time at the end of the call, I'd love to hear you guys' opinion on the other companies running the playbook now. It's becoming more interesting as there's more of them.
Yeah, I mean, Semler brought up Eric Semler brought it up today. I think he tweeted about it. He's going to put out a post of all of the. He's got a couple hundred zombie companies that could be adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet instead of treasuries. So I'm curious to see what the zombie zone. Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I'm sure that conversation he had with Saylor this weekend when they were hanging out on the boat or whatever, it would probably help give him some guidance on how to continue that path, because they've got a great story, right? I mean, the stock price has tripled since they've adopted a Bitcoin treasury strategy, and there's a lot of potential on the horizon for that continue to grow. I mean, my wife works in the biotech zone, and I asked her to look up Semler just from a industry perspective, like take somebody out of the Bitcoin ecosphere and like look up Semler, and had some people do some research on the back end. And, you know, the independent research that I had people looking into the stock basically called it a zombie company without calling it a zombie company. They're like, I have no idea why the stock is doing what it's doing. These people know nothing about Bitcoin and what's going on in that world or ecosphere. So it's just we're going to see it proliferate through these other markets into different companies. I'm excited about that future. And now we've got, Hester Pierce at the helm of the SEC, pushing forward crypto regulation, which I think is incredibly bullish for just the wide open path for innovation in this space, which is just like exciting to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't realize that they couldn't. I was hoping that they were going to have some little green dots for Strike ATM like immediately, but I guess we're going to have to wait for that. I
think there's a period that they've got to wait in order for them to file an ATM. I'm not 100%. I mean, Jesse or Ben probably have better perspective on that, but I think there's a specific period before you're able to put a filing in for an ATM, but that will be public news and public information. I'm keeping my eye on Edgar, which is the SEC website. Like, if you're interested in like the actual financial filings that go on behind the scenes, which if you're heavily invested here, I would take a look at Edgar, because you could read all of this information as public information. That's the reason this exists. That's the reason the SEC exists. And you'll be able to follow that and see if an ATM has been announced. And I'm sure Saylor will make it very clear when something like that has been filed. And it might be in the next earnings call. Not 100% sure when that will be, but that's on the
I'm dying to see how that's going to work out. I just want to see the ATM, whiners. I just want to hear them shut up. But
they're not going to.
Yeah. I mean, just because before I saw Quant Bros 1, I just traded options on strategy because it was just like a leveraged Bitcoin play. Like, I didn't know anything more about it. And I'm wondering, and I think it was Forrester's YouTube channel. I think it was an episode of his on 88 Sats Radio. And there was a suggestion that it may not be the ATM itself, but the psychological effect of investors knowing that the ATM is happening is causing them to kind of be more willing to trade out of the stock, because they think he's tanking the price. So they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to get out of it before the ATM drives the price down, even though the ATM isn't affecting it, because they went out of their way to kind of demonstrate that on the call, that, hey, our selling volume is tiny, compared to the overall market. But psychologically, I wonder if that's just affecting investors, and if the quicker that they can move that over to the preferred stock, I think the better.
My real question is, does big money even care? Like retail? Yeah, retail is going to be stupid. Some portion of retail is going to be stupid, and they're going to care about this and make a bunch of noise. And it's likely even bots and hedge funds that are out there trying to get retail to sell their shares of MicroStrategy. But I think a lot of the investor base right now is really just frozen, waiting, because where's a better opportunity cost of capital at the moment? So I don't think
big money cares.
I don't think big money really cares. So I think the narrative is really just now that MicroStrategy has talked about it, and they said it in their earnings call, like, there's something that now retail can grab a hold of and help with narrative conversations in the future. Where this is going to get really crazy is when they start to lever this thing up and add leverage to the balance sheet, and all of a sudden these valuation conversations about whether the company is overvalued or undervalued is going to float back to the top, and people are going to be really confused, and there's going to be capital moving in all directions. Go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah. So to your point, Jeff, big money doesn't give a shit. I really don't think they do, honestly. Yeah. And on top of that, and I've tried to tell people this when they like via DM and whatnot, all the conversation you've seen about ATM, to what Jeff just mentioned, a lot of it is bots that are spooling up and trying to push the narrative on Twitter, right? And then you have algos that are trading against the sentiment of the bots. Like, basically, the more you talk about the ATM, the more the bots are going to talk about it, the more it's going to freak people out. And to Soleil's point, there is a feedback loop when it comes to the ATM, right? So people think it's affecting the stock, therefore they trade like it affects the stock. But proportionally, there is no one thing that's going to drive a stock price up and down unless it's a huge market event, right? So like Trump's tariffs, for instance, and this is not me getting political. It is just that it is a statement of a very, very big market moving activity that can then affect the stock market. But we already saw how it bounced back, right? No one individual activity by a company that is being done third party is going to be pushing their stock down in perpetuity. There are too many moving parts. But I do think that there's a feedback loop, and it becomes somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But that still doesn't necessarily ascribe it only to ATM. But that's neither here nor there. Big money doesn't care, and it's big money that's moving this stock. It is not retail. So while everyone else is getting freaked out, we see more and more institutions are going in. We see that BlackRock had to increase their allocation, probably because of their AUM requirements and their client requirements. We see all of these different large scale players coming into MicroStrategy, while everyone on Twitter is freaking out about the ATM, freaking out about how we had a 5% down day, freaking out about how we're not at 500 again. I think people, as corny as it sounds, really need to just zoom out and relax. If you're in it for the right reasons, if you're in it for financial freedom and sovereignty, you're going to be fine. That's the overall thesis that all of us are going with. So a lot of the noise, I really, really hope, to Saleo's point, that it just dies down, because it's getting kind of old. I'm tired of hearing about it, right? So hopefully that people can keep watching us and realize that it's going to be fine. There's going to be ups and downs. I have seen drawdowns of MicroStrategy that should have broken me, and they didn't, just because I had the experience of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin made me hardened. MicroStrategy made me unhinged, and I'm here for the long haul. That's just how it is.
And
When
I
I
think
was
it's important to have the long haul. Yeah, go ahead, Soleil, please.
And I was going to say, when I was trading it just as like a leveraged Bitcoin ETF, I wasn't really doing anything like valuing it and saying, oh, it should be 1.5x because they have this much leverage, or it should be 1.75 because they have this much leverage. But since they've been reducing that leverage, is it possible that the algorithms or the bots or whatever are just kind of trading off of the leverage that they hold and, kind of treating it as a 1.25 or a 1.1x, or is it because nobody knows how to value MSTR really? So, but these algorithms have to be keying off of something.
They are.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Jeff.
I just say, yeah, go ahead.
No, I think so. I touched upon that, Soleil, in the beginning there, because I saw your guys' call last Wednesday where you were discussing whether to look at P, not to look at P, whether to go to a fiat point of view or not. I personally don't think that price earning will become a driving metric. It will, of course, have some importance, but when you know the underlying is not a company putting out this, 10 billion in profit every year, and then it moves up a little bit, it moves down a little bit. When you know it's the price of a commodity underlying, I don't think PE will be used by many. I could be some bots, of course. I do like the MNAV to have some importance. But yeah, over to you guys. Anybody want to jump in? Grain, you haven't had a chance to say anything yet. Do you have something you want to add to that, or do you want to talk about the certain price Bitcoin has to be at for
Yeah, so I'll make a quick
Sure.
comment. Look, MNAV is always calculated based upon after the price, and then whatever your net asset value is, and you calculate that number. Could it get overheated? Sure. I think that from my analysis, interesting, but not one of my key drivers. I think the part that you wanted, that you had mentioned about the quote that I made, I believe that a Sailor and MicroStrategy, for the benefit of that stock to get S&P 500 inclusion, that that Sailor knows that the price of Bitcoin needs to be higher. Jeff said just earlier, what was it, Jeff? You said $97,000 a coin would erase the past 4 quarters of negative earnings,
something around
correct?
that. 96, 96. It just kind of depends on the future buys, but yeah.
Right. So if Bitcoin was at 93,000 in January, 93,000 and change, he said 97, but that's the bare minimum to get it to zero. You always want to, in this particular quarter, if there was a quarter for MicroStrategy to blow out, that would be Q1, because those numbers will be reported at MicroStrategy World, May 5th, first quarter with FASB earnings. It's the last, they have to do it this particular quarter. We know that's a fact. They have to do it. And so I think they want to have blowout earnings. I think that makes sense. And the only way they could do that is by hitting the converts, which I said will probably be 80% going forward. So they'll hit the converts instead of the ATMs. I think they'll keep the ATMs in order to pay dividends on Strike. And what they'll do is they'll boost the price of Bitcoin, which will boost the price of MicroStrategy.
And it might happen.
Thought.
I think there's incentive for that to happen in the second half of March. So kind of playing to Josh Mandel's
Mm.
second half of March theory, which is interesting when you think about the game theory there.
The odds of
And there's a reason why in game theory, why Josh is probably saying that. If it happens in the second half of March and the price runs up and then it comes back down, goes up in 2 weeks, and then it begins to peak and drop, you'd rather have that hit start on March 15th and go to the end of the month than have it start on March 1st, have it peak on March 15th, and then drop back down. So it's about timing it just right for the sweet spot of Q1 earnings. It's just straightforward, logical thinking. So if that's the idea behind that, then it captures it perfectly.
And if they went that route, they've got an entire month to go market this thing, too. Right, like let's just say I don't know what their largest convertible bond raise I think was the $3 billion one that they raised in November. I think that was the largest that they had ever done. So if they're going to go out to market with a $10 billion, $15 billion raise, you kind of have to go market that to a few different pools of capital and grow that investor base. So now they've got a month to do that. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a big number, if it's a bigger number than we've ever seen before, and they unload a significant portion of the convertible debt in March, February or March.
Yeah, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why I think it's going to be a big number. Let's say it's more than 3 or 4 billion. Why could that happen? They have the one convert, I believe it's a 2027. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong. That one will most likely convert. That's the only one I believe they can force as a soft convert. That'll happen. They'll go back to those investors and say, hey, it turned out great. We're now going to do another convert. Why don't you roll this back into this with all your gains? And when they do converts, there's no additional shares hitting the market. There just isn't. And if you look at what happened in fourth quarter, from my analysis, they increased the number of shares 20% in that one quarter. And that was in the Q1 numbers. If somebody wants to fact check me, they could go look at those slides. But they added 46, 47 million shares in one quarter.
Yeah. And Grain, half of the convertible debt is in the money, so it can convert. So we're talking about if half of it did convert, where the current leverage ratio is 6% with today's Bitcoin price. And if the price of Bitcoin continues to go up, that leverage number continues to go down. And they told us in the earnings call that the leverage ratio that they're targeting is 20 to 30%. So right there, you've got significant capacity to raise, $10 billion plus of convertible debt, and which would be the largest single Bitcoin buy that MicroStrategy has ever made. So I think there's some excitement on the horizon of a potential very large Bitcoin buy that could be the single largest Bitcoin buy, I guess, ever made by a corporation. I wouldn't be surprised with that.
I think it's interesting how they're going to play it too, because if you think about the more Bitcoin they have in their balance sheet, the lower their debt leverage ratio, obviously, if they have more assets. So would they go out? I think the question I'm trying to figure out is, are they going to go out and do a $10 billion single convertible issuance, or are they going to do three $3 billions? And if they do three $3 billions spaced out over 2-3 weeks in between, then they're not only pumping the price of Bitcoin with every purchase, signaling to the market we're starting this campaign of convertible bond issuance, but they're also increasing the assets in their balance sheet before the next level of convertible issuance. So it's kind of like a double whammy. You're pumping the price of Bitcoin, adding assets. So your leverage ratio isn't actually going up as much as would be the case if you just did a lump sum 15 billion.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they play it. I mean, even if it's a $4 billion buy, it'd be the biggest buy they've ever done.
Exactly.
It'd be the biggest corporate buy.
We'll know more next Monday. Each week is so exciting. How many Bitcoin is bought and how did he finance it? But I guess everyone's in the expectations of it's lever up time. He needs to get back to between 20 and 30. And why not go closer to 30 and then he can start using the ATM, and that way it'll come down again. And it'll also go down as just the price of Bitcoin pumps.
It's a moving target, yeah.
Sorry?
It's a moving target. The 30% leverage ratio runs away from them as quick as they buy.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. Tim, what are your expectations here for Q1, or what excites you most about MicroStrategy right now? What do you think that people may not be thinking about, or pick any of those that you'd like to comment on, though?
Yeah, I was going to just echo what Dan said last week about if they just deploy everything, right? You're at 30.02% leverage ratio. But if you stagger that and you get it going in your favor, you're probably below that. And what I think a lot of people don't understand is this is all based on the Bitcoin network. It's not based on just dollars flying around. So it's like the Bitcoin network and then equity, which they use so much of the ATM so that you have that solid base of collateral to then add leverage to. And to you guys' points, right? If you just kind of stair step that, you may be able to expire the current capital plan and get the Strike ATM going and stay under a 30% leverage ratio. So I think that could be super interesting.
Absolutely.
Also,
And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was corrected by Jesse, our legal expert. He sent me a DM, and I believe there's an S3 filing that happened on January 27th for Strike that allows them to use the ATM on the preferred shares. So that, I mean, we could see that.
Let's go.
Yeah, I'll have to read through this a little bit more and work with Jesse on this, but that is possible.
Yeah, Ben Workman was in the chat early on. I don't know if he's still watching, but he said there's certain volume targets that that MicroStrategy has to reach before they can start doing ATMs there.
Good catch.
So yeah. So it's yeah, you gotta watch out for if Ben writes something in the chat. You gotta pay attention.
I was
to
good
that.
catch on the MicroStrategy strategy thing. I'm still getting used to it too. It's hard.
Yeah, it's
hard.
It's hard. It's a thing. So there's that with Strike, but also I see often a lot of people are asking, well, should I invest in Strike, or they choose to buy some Strike. But if you believe in strategy, take a simple MSTR. Strike is created to benefit the strategy stockholders, the MSTR stockholders. It's a way to raise funds in a way so that each MSTR stock will have more Bitcoin behind it. That's the whole purpose. So it's if you believe in Bitcoin, if you believe in strategy, then that is what should outperform in the long run the common stock itself, MSTR strategy. Any thoughts on that from any of you, or have you come across the same?
I think it's helpful to explain that the preferred shares are a stepped down volatility, right? You get the dividend payment in lieu of upside. So the risk that the preferred stockholders are not willing to take, the upside and the downside, is effectively transported into the common equity holder. So the common equity holder effectively benefits from taking the upside volatility and the downside volatility off of the preferred stockholder. So I think it's just helpful to think about it like that. Like the common stockholder is getting the benefit of this BTC yield because of truncating the upside volatility and the downside volatility.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Jeff. And that's exactly why Strike as a product, as an investment, it's tailored to companies that need to buy something that looks like that with that volatility. It doesn't have the same upside. So if you are already a bull on Bitcoin and a bull on strategy and Michael Saylor, it really is the common stock. Take a simple MSTR that is your go-to. And none of what we're saying here is financial advice. We're all just enjoying to talk the investment called strategy. But there's also others, and unless you guys have something right now on strategy that you want to pick up, something you're just sitting with at the tip of your tongue, we can do that, or we can get back to it. I also want to hear you guys' opinion on, because I remember Ryan once posted that he had stock in Semler, and there's a couple of different opportunities now, a couple of different companies running the playbook. There's obviously strategy itself, the one and only, and no one will ever reach them. But I think from an investor point of view, what's also interesting is what's going to give me the best return, and so there is strategy, which is the biggest and likely the safest in terms of they have the volume, and the playbook is being created by them and fine-tuned by them. So I personally consider strategy is a rare combination of both very safe, but also very high return. But in Japan, there's MetaPlanet with Dylan Leclerc working there. There's Semler that we spoke about a bit earlier here. You brought it up, Jeff. There's Culver, I believe, and there's others that are starting to run this. Is this something that's interesting for any of you? Is this something that you're looking at, or is that only Ryan that took a position there?
Oh no, I've been looking at Semler since the start. I actually had the first spaces with Eric Semler back in, I think, what was it? I forget what month it was. But as far as all of the companies that are going to run the Sailor playbook, I think Semler Scientific is going to run it most earnestly. They are following it most closely. In terms of performance, they have a much smaller market cap, so the impact of Bitcoin on their balance sheet plus their core business has the potential, and I don't want anyone in the comments getting all pissed off, has the potential to outperform MicroStrategy at certain points. Long term, however, that is harder to dictate just because of the industry that they're in. But I've spoken with Eric Semler numerous times. I have a rather large position in Semler Scientific. I don't have any positions in Cooler or Rumble or anything else besides Semler when it comes to leverage Bitcoin equity plays.
What about GameStop, Adrian? Let's go GameStop.
So GameStop, Ryan yeah, Ryan Cohen posted that picture with Sailor this weekend that got some people talking. I posted about it. Now, I don't think they met and didn't at least have a conversation about it, right? So if GameStop were to adopt a Sailor playbook, and Jeff, you might know this better than I do. What do they have, like 4 billion, 4.4?
Cash on hand?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if they were to adopt the Sailor playbook, I think that would be amazing. That would just add another layer to the GameStop.
That would kick off some incredible Wall Street bets.
Yes.
Chatter just around Bitcoin and everything. Oh my God, it would be like the beast awakens. Like this thing that's been asleep for 2 years, 3 years. It could get the narrative out there to most of the plebes that aren't paying attention to what's going on in Bitcoin. Because if that happens, then those people also start to look at like who else holds Bitcoin? Why do they hold Bitcoin? Yeah. And then some people look at MicroStrategy for the first time. They look at strategy for the first time, and they're like, holy shit, this company has 476,000 Bitcoin. Like, how'd they do that? Like, strategy's flying like under the radar for most of the world. Like there's a ton of people that follow what we're doing, but like what our largest True North calls got 58,000 people. I mean, that's just like globally, it's just a small number of people in the grand scheme of things. Anyway, sorry to take away there. Go ahead.
Yeah, the GME group of people, they're just as nuts as Bitcoiners in a lot of ways. So if they got into this, that's, I mean, that will really set things off. But I think that I'm still a believer that I think we're going to have a few large companies come in. I don't mean like Mag 7, but like a GameStop, like companies around that size. I think we have a few more that are going to come into the fray. I think it's very, very telling that Ryan Cohen retweeted the photo and then Sailor retweeted the photo as well. I don't think that was just for shits and giggles. They definitely at least had a conversation about this. Is he able to do it? Will he do it? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on that. But it's fun to think that about the what ifs just theoretically, is really, really huge.
Yeah, what about
It's
the game
def-
theory of GameStop where because Jeff's described it before, where he was thinking about the game theory and he's like, okay, because Veritasium did a really good one on game theory, and it was they came out with this thing where you could either defect against the other person that's playing the game, or you could cooperate, and they would award you different coin amounts whether you defect or cooperate.
Yeah.
And with GameStop, you got paid to defect, right? Whoever defected first and sold, then you got out just in time.
Nailed
But
it.
what happens if GameStop has Bitcoin and you can no longer defect against them because the people who cooperate win? Because
Right.
instead of GameStop getting pumped, if they have Bitcoin on the balance sheet, then it doesn't collapse. Because
And
you
they
can't
they
just
could
turn
start
it
running
off.
the MicroStrategy playbook too. Convertible
Exactly.
debt, boom, preferred stock, ATM, like bang, 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 capital in the door, in the door, in the door, smash buy, smash buy, smash buy. That's like the same thing. And then all of a sudden, this whole like everybody's running around with their heads cut off, like what's going on? And people are yelling at the SEC, shut it down, and like it's good. You can't,
No, you can't.
you can't. Yeah, that would be epic.
So
Because Bitcoin becomes the floor. So you can try to tank the price, but Bitcoin is the floor. It's never going to go below 1x MNAV, right? So what can you do to GameStop's price? You can try to turn off the buy button, but it just doesn't matter.
And if it does go below 1, you're selling your kidney and your children for more shares because you're getting free Bitcoin, basically.
Exactly.
yeah,
But
or you're
right.
selling Bitcoin and buying back the stock,
Yeah,
or just buying the stock as an
exactly.
outsider, right?
Mhm.
So I'm sure there's going to be a lot more companies. Naturally, it will happen that they'll go over to a Bitcoin treasury and let that be the main treasury asset. I think from an investor standpoint, it's interesting if it is not a company that puts 3% of their value will be this little piece of Bitcoin that they have in their treasury, but the ones that are actual running the strategy playbook of having as much Bitcoin as possible and then using the different tools to lever up and thereby outperform Bitcoin itself, as strategy now has done for years, which is why a lot of people find it interesting, obviously. Soleil, what about you in terms of, are you focused on strategy only, or do you have your eyes or money in some of these other opportunities like Semler or MetaPlanet or something else?
So with my channel, I focus on strategy, but I try to show a little bit of diversification of strategies. Like I have a 5K account challenge on Robinhood, and so I trade miners over there. And not because
Ouch.
I believe that one miner is any better than any other one, but just to kind of demonstrate, look, if you can't afford 100 shares of MicroStrategy, you can still sell options against Bitcoin derivatives and make some money.
Okay, fair. Grain of salt, what about you?
He's got laser eyes.
In terms of other things that I find interesting right now.
Grain has got
You got
laser
laser eyes. Now, I was just asking grain of salt.
Yeah, no, I'm only focused on one thing right now. It's I will do a space talking with Dan probably in the next day or so. I'm solely focused right now on MicroStrategy options and optimizing that position. So with that perspective, we'll probably talk about the post-mortem of what happened in Q4 and my pinned tweet. And that's where I stand. What I typically like to do is I always take a rifle approach and be precise, get really good at one thing, do it at a very high level, and the other things I block out because that's what I like to focus on. I believe in specialization and then just not looking at a lot of other things. We do have Bitcoin treasury options based upon other companies. We're developing metrics for us to track on those, but that's information that we will probably not share.
Gotcha. How about you, Tim? You focus on strategy only, or have you looked at some of the others and also, what is MNAV in one compared to another? Or you focus on strategy?
So I'd say most of my focus is on strategy. I do have very small positions in Semler and Kohler, and from the aspect of keeping my eye on them. And for me, at least, if I don't own it, I'm probably not going to check it, at least not with regularity. So especially with the podcast, it's like, what's one doing versus another? I think Adrian mentioned it a little bit, right? Like smaller market cap, those sorts of dynamics, right? So if one's at 1,000, one's at 500, and one's at $50 a share, right? Just how does that play out from the law of big numbers and diminishing returns and just, right, cranking share price and all these different dynamics. So yeah.
And you've got the Bitcoin Treasuries podcast. So like, I mean, part of the goal of the podcast is to review, like speak with all of these companies that are exploring this process. Like what's the mentality of adopting a Bitcoin Treasury? What does that look like? What are the hurdles? What are the challenges? Who's in the way? How has it changed how you view your business? Like what happens from that perspective as well? I mean, I think Tim's podcast is going to be one of the most popular podcasts here in the next 24 months as more companies,
Without a doubt.
start to get in the door here, because once this thing starts hitting the news, right? Like I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal article or the video today, which was just like absolutely ridiculous.
Garbage.
That they just, I can't believe these people have jobs at this place. Honestly, neither here nor there.
Funded by USA. No, I'm sorry. I'm not. Let's not get political.
Yeah, probably. Doge,
Just a joke.
The Doge will figure that out. The Doge father. So, yeah, it's once that bewilderment is cleared, once it's forced to be cleared up, and the new earnings, MicroStrategy adopting FASB fair value accounting here in May, will make people do more research, right? Because what's going to happen is a lot of these people are going to be like, how were you so wrong? Right? Like they're going to start asking this question, like, how were you so wrong? And that is going to force, more research and more people to look at this. And then, once they start looking into it, and then you're going to see other companies starting to adopt it, even partially, right? Like, companies don't need to fully adopt a Bitcoin Treasury strategy to be successful. Like if they've got decent cash flow, like you can, take a 10%, 20% position in Bitcoin with your treasury, and that's still bullish, right? I mean, look at Tesla, right? The value gain on the Bitcoin held on their balance sheet propped up their earnings for the last period. So it's helpful. It's diversifying. And Tim, I think you're in this like really great point here where you're going to be able to speak with a lot of these companies that are going through this thought process, which is pretty fascinating.
Absolutely. And I'll just give a little preview. I did interview Lynn Alden today, and she is obviously not someone that you think is going to come with bull fuel, right? Like Dan Hillary. I'm just picking on Dan. But she does have a thesis that this cycle is going to go longer, right? Kind of a grind up, but maybe a little bit of a longer cycle, which I would tend to agree with. Of course, we all want to see big numbers, but I thought that was pretty telling on her part from someone that's very measured.
It's funny. I was thinking literally 3-4 minutes ago how we're in February, and it doesn't feel like this bull run is nowhere near where it's gonna go. And I've been talking about October as the most likely month for a peak, but it's so close now. But that's interesting, actually, if it might go longer. I mean, nobody knows, but what I know for sure is that I'm very bullish and expect us to go a lot higher this year, and it's very.
Let me pose this question to you, Anders. What do you think happens if strategy is sitting at a 15% leverage ratio in October at the so-called Bitcoin peak? What do you think happens?
I mean, they will need to take on. Well, it depends where Bitcoin is, I guess. If he sees it as Saylor sees it as a potential top or not, but it means that they have more lever, they can take on more debt and buy more Bitcoin, and therefore avoid a collapse of the price, right? Is what you're suggesting, and I tend to agree. And I guess it definitely brings up a good point, Jeff, that MicroStrategy has not been at this size at a peak of a bull run where they also had the entire playbook more or less down. Like, he wasn't using all these levers that he is now, or the team is, back in 21. They only just got started. They had been in it for a bit more than a year when that bull run peaked. So yeah, it's that's a good, very good point, Jeff. What do you think?
Well, I mean, if you think about the last bear cycle, right? A lot of people were concerned about MicroStrategy solvency, and I think they did have some debt that had a like liquidation price, and they were able to kind of work their way around it, something like 16 or 17,000. But where they're at right now, none of the debt is encumbered. It's not used as collateral in any of the transactions, and so a lot of the the bears out there are really focused on this like MicroStrategy average purchase price, which I think is what 65,000 of the 478,000 Bitcoin that they buy. But that number is like useless. It doesn't mean anything. And it was really helpful to look at, in the earnings call that they had, they show the debt to coverage ratio, which is effectively like the leverage ratio, showing that they've got 40 times more assets than they do have debt on their balance sheet. And it's like, it's one of those things that you start to see the value and the financial strength of, holding this company, and where like they may not run into any issues. Even if the leverage ratio went up to 70% or 80, let's just say Bitcoin falls 70% and the leverage ratio is still not over 100. And the stock is still probably going to trade at a premium to its underlying Bitcoin per share. And if it doesn't, then you use more convertible debt. Like you go raise more convertible debt because it's going to be super appealing. And if not, then you use the ATM to like bring down your leverage ratio. So they basically have like they have this like belt of tools that they could use to manage these, to manage their exposure in any one direction. So that they didn't have in past cycles.
Yeah.
And they're in strength, and other corporations are adopting this playbook and doing the same thing. So I tend to agree that, and you have a favorable political environment and people that are building on Bitcoin and potential like increasing utility across the board, strategic Bitcoin reserve, all this other shit, which is just gravy in my opinion. So it's hard to imagine what this is going to look like, but I think it's going to look different for sure.
And that's part of what makes it so interesting this time around. And each time we're all asking ourselves, is this time different? And so far it hasn't been, but it would be great. It would be great. I would fully support it. Jeff, while you're on the mic, what about yourself? Are you investment-wise fully focused on strategy, or are you keeping an eye on key numbers getting like too attractive, cheap on Semler or MetaPlanet or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I have some of the other ones, but it's a very small share in relative proportion. It's more of just like, oh, this is interesting. I'll like, as Tim mentioned, if I don't buy a little piece of it, it doesn't come up in my watch list. So I like buy a little piece and it shows up in my watch list and I keep track of it. But the scale and scope of analysis that I do is drastically different. I think I'm
makes sense.
That may change over time as I see some like unique potential opportunities. As you know, like I'm really interested in the architecture and structure of the equity markets. So, for example, if something like Semler is looking like it's going to get included in, the Russell 2000 index or something like that, that might be a like a swing trade or something I'd be interested in. But I'm excited for the future day that we see other companies approaching S&P 500 inclusion with a Bitcoin treasury strategy, and those companies only need to get to a $14 billion threshold. So I mean, we could see it sooner than a lot of people think.
Yeah, that is interesting. What about you, Dan? I all eyes on strategy and the options market, I presume. Oh, do you have a half an eye on another BTC treasuries company like Semler or MetaPlanet?
Yeah, Gray and I are obviously pretty locked in on MicroStrategy these days, or strategy these days, but Semler is pretty interesting to me. And I've only done a little bit of preliminary work. I entered into Semler with options, so I'll let you know how those end up. But there's also like cool opportunities for like if you have smaller, like I have smaller accounts that I can't use. You know, I can't sell lots of 100 on MicroStrategy on strategy because of their size. You know, it's fun to look at IBIT or Semler for those scenarios, much like what Soleil was saying. So that's another way to kind of force yourself to be introduced to those.
Right.
But Semler's behaving weird too. That's the other thing. Semler's not behaving like MicroStrategy in any way, shape, or form over the past few weeks. So it's just they're very much so like more like a traditional equity, and I'm not by any means a specialist there, so I try to stay away as much as I.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and the companies have to have that oversized focused or on Bitcoin for that even to be the comparison, and you start looking at MNAV, and it's not a whole enterprise behind it that is taking up too much of the market cap. So Jeff, I know you probably have a bunch of great topics for tonight. You guys have your internal call. Is there any of that you could yeah, there you go.
Just writing them down. Yeah. Somebody asked an interesting question, like what's the next catalyst to potentially spike IV? I mean, earnings, S&P 500 front running, strategic Bitcoin reserve. The other one I would put on there is potential repeal of corporate alternative minimum tax. And I would keep an eye on that because that's something I think that's got a lot of people have hiccups on this. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see something happen in Q1 or Q2 getting proposed, politically. But so I think that alone could be a catalyst in and of itself, or something favorable from a tax perspective on, crypto, whether that be, no capital gains if held for a certain number of years or, something like that. I think that could be a fundamental catalyst that we could see on the horizon too. But I don't know. There's so many weird things going on in the market right now. I mean, the yield curve is still high. The tail of the yield curve is still high. So there's a lot of just strange things on a macro scale just to keep track of. So, yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Guys, the rest of you, any topics that you have in mind that we haven't touched upon yet that you'd like to share?
I do got a job. I got to go eat dinner before our other call.
Oh yeah.
So, catch you guys later.
Yeah, I got to jump also.
Yeah, thanks, Anders. Appreciate the time.
Fine.
Of course, it's my
Thanks,
pleasure. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Grain. What about the rest of you? Do you have some touch points that you want to touch upon, talk about before you guys have a break and do your internal call?
Well, I forget.
I actually dropped two, actually, by the way.
Go ahead,
so.
Dan.
Thanks, Adrian.
See you, Adrian.
Dan, you got something I can hear.
Yeah, I'm pretty contrarian with the whole catalyst thing. I don't think the catalysts are as big a deal as people make them out to be necessarily. I think it's all leverage and debt ratio. It's all leverage and debt ratio, in my opinion. Every single bit of it. I don't think FASB matters. It's going to be great. It's going to be exciting, whatever. Anyone with any money in this trade or half a brain knows we'll be able to calculate to the T FASB earnings. So it won't be a surprise, in my opinion. It's going to be known at the end of the quarter, right? And so it's all going to come down to, I think, end of April. Like between now and end of March, sorry. Between now and end of March, they have to get 6 billion of converts out the door, pretty much, before end of March minimum. And we're going to know what the price of Bitcoin is. That interplays with the price of Bitcoin, and we'll know what the price of Bitcoin is end of March at the end of Q1. So all those things coming together, I think is going to make for massive amounts of volatility at the end of March. And so I think everything else is just noise. Like it's literally convertible debt issuance, size, scale, rate of that, leverage ratio, and Bitcoin price at the end of Q1. Once we start honing in on what that may look like, I think things should get pretty wacky pretty quick.
Yeah, and
I
if they
have
keep
to
adding
agree
that
with you.
leverage, then really, it may just start trading even more like a leveraged play, irrespective of the Bitcoin price. So, it's trading probably at a smaller, uh, leveraged play because their Bitcoin leverage is only, what did they say, 6%, 7%? But if they get it back up over 20, even if Bitcoin is still the same, it could start trading at a higher price just because they've added leverage and for no other reason.
Exactly. Yeah. The leverage itself justifies a lot of that premium. If you just forecast out future Bitcoin prices, you won't pay a premium. You wouldn't pay if MicroStrategy was trading at 1x MNAV and had no leverage, you wouldn't pay a premium for the future appreciation of Bitcoin. But if MicroStrategy is just a debt structure with leverage, you would pay a premium for that structure because you ultimately will accrue that value as Bitcoin's price rises, right? So then you're paying a premium for both the leverage structure and the future BTC accretive nature. So like, in my opinion, I think you're totally right that the increase in leverage itself justifies a higher MNAV or multiple, whatever you call it.
Tim, did you
That's
mention
interesting.
tariffs
So
earlier?
you're both saying that just the
Go ahead.
fact that if strategy levers up and goes from this less than 10% to above 20% or 25%, that you think that will command a higher MNAV premium. Interesting.
And when I went into the trade, I went in. Strategy was trading about 1.5 MNAV, fully diluted, and I calculated that if you expect Bitcoin to rise to $250,000 and that leverage ratio to remain the same, then the justifiable MNAV premium for that debt structure was like 1.3. Like there's justifiable premium because the debt melts away as the price of Bitcoin rises. So you ultimately would pay a premium over that Bitcoin holdings, right? And so as the price of Bitcoin goes up and as that debt expands, or larger amounts of debt justify a slightly higher MNAV. Now, does the higher debt justify a 10 MNAV? No. Like you'd have to have an insane amount of debt, right? But the difference between 10% debt and 25% debt makes the difference between a justifiable 1.4 MNAV and 1.8 MNAV. And that's only, and that is just like the kick starts the kind of crazy FOMO that goes up. So.
Yeah, and then if Bitcoin does pump, it's just a springboard.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, I love what you guys are saying, and I agree. And I think probably we're all in the same boat that we would like to see a much higher leverage in strategy than right now, where they almost don't have debt. Like, please take on some more debt, borrow some of this free money with zero coupon, and buy corn before it goes to 250,000 and then further. But I mean, that's what he said he'll do, or that they'll do in this quarter. So I guess that we'll be seeing each week now going forward some nice big purchases every Monday, and we'll be able to see that it came from debt, convertible bonds, and preferred stock, which is super exciting to see what the demand will be for that. What are your thoughts on that, Tim, in terms of the current leverage?
I just see that we have about 12 weeks until the next earnings call, right? Give or take a few days. And they can issue without any additional ATM from Strike, which is not in play yet. Probably take at least a few weeks to a few months for that to get up and running, based on the cursory understanding I have of it, that they have to get low 20 billions out the door in 12 weeks. Well, what's that? Well, it's like between 1 and 2 billion a week. What did we see this morning? Over $700 million Bitcoin buy. So it's like, I think you're going to see in varying amounts, right? Might be $500 million one week and $2.5 billion the next week, but on average, 1 to 2 billion a week for the next 12 weeks. And, maybe they'll pump it up and supersize it towards the end, or have some structure to it where you're stair stepping it up. I think that'd make complete sense. And they can obviously announce a new capital plan or something else at any time. They don't have to wait for an earnings call, but probably would, narrative wise make sense to maybe wait to do some big announcement on an earnings call. So that's just where my mind is as far as like, how much time do we have? how much of the capital plan do we have? The easiest way to figure out what someone's going to do in the future is what they did in the past. But in Strategy's case, you just supersize it. Right? You're going through the McDonald's drive-through. You want to supersize Ed Fry? Absolutely. I want to supersize my strategy.
Yep. And I don't care how much money Doge saves, the printers still have to print. Like, there's no way that they can get out of the amount of debt that they have without just printing. And I think it's kind of important to think about the pass that Trump's going to get, because he can hide behind Doge and say, look, I'm saving all this money. So when he does decide to just, get the Fed to lower interest rates or whatever he needs to do to get the money printers printing, he can do it without taking the hit that someone else might have taken politically, because he's been, perceived to be so tough on wasteful spending. It kind of reminds me of, people forget that Reagan actually signed some gun control back in the day when it was, historically you think, okay, Republicans pro gun and Democrats anti-gun, but because of that perception, he was actually able to get gun control legislation passed and not really have his legacy be remembered in that way. And I think Trump's going to be the same way. He can just say, look at all the money that I'm saving, and then just money printer go burr. And of course, Bitcoin, if you're orange pilled even a little bit, you know what that means for the price of Bitcoin and then for strategy on top of it.
Yeah. Dan, Tim, and Soleil, thank you so much for your time as well, for everyone here. Always love having you guys on. I hope we can do this a whole lot more. Tim, before we end, and it's for all of you, if there's something you want to just share or talk about, I still have another 10 minutes or so, but Tim, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on with your podcast there? Because you started your podcast, I think, just before I started MSTR Mondays, and we met in Santa Monica back then. Your focus now is on companies that start adapting Bitcoin as the way to save assets on the balance sheet, or
Yeah, so it's been a combination of both Bitcoin and Bitcoin treasuries as far as coverage. And I was talking to Jeff a few days ago, and I said, if 10% of what we think is going to happen this year happens, like, it might be a full-time job just interviewing all of these CEOs of companies, mostly public, probably, right, as far as announcements, but maybe some private that are adopting Bitcoin. So that's super interesting. I don't know if you saw, I posted a picture with JLD. I had coffee with him when he was in New York, that does MicroStrategy Today, or now.
Oh, no, I did not see that. I've been busy this weekend.
Yeah, so that was a week or two ago. That was super fun to meet him in person, and just such a small, right? I was watching your, I think it was last week you had, or 2 weeks ago, JLD and the other gentleman from MicroStrategy Today on, and
that was last week.
You're like, MSTR Mondays with Anders. True North, MicroStrategy Today, and like there's only like 4 things you were saying that you watch, and so it's it's still small, and it's really interesting to see where all of this is going to go. And I sat down with Lynn today. I sat down with Joe Bryan. He had the video a few months ago that Sailor retweeted called "What's the Problem?" And he's over in London. So that was a really interesting, great interview. And also Joe Consorti. So yeah, those are all coming out this week. And have La Dozier on the schedule here in the next couple of weeks. So I don't know that anyone's ever interviewed La Dozier before. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm pretty excited about, is just, some of the names that you know and love, but also maybe some names that you're like, what? I didn't even know that guy had a face. So it should be fun.
Are you sure he's going to do it in person, or just send his AI persona in his place?
I don't know. It's going to be a fun adventure either way.
Yeah. Probably won't be able to tell.
Yeah.
The last thing I got is, you know, Tim doesn't just do, interview other people, because I saw him get interviewed on somebody else's podcast and he ran his mouth for an hour straight. So, you know, you should definitely check that out.
Yeah, that's why also when I had Tim on the first time, I was saying like we only pretty much only hear Tim saying this is not financial advice, right? He's not the first. He's not a Mike Hogger. It's nice to get a little bit more spotlight on Tim and his opinions. And actually, Tim, now that you bring that up, we have a call tomorrow with, I'm going to put that in the ticker there, all the fun things you can do in Restream. We have a call tomorrow with Jeff, which you asked me about this Camp Nakamoto. So just real quick, campnakamoto.com is a Bitcoiner retreat. There's going to be space for there is space for I think about 100 people. And it's in October 10 to 13. It's on an island on the east coast of US. Larry Lepard is going to be there, James Lavish, Natalie Brunell, Mark Moss, Joe Consorti that you mentioned, Michelle Weekly, and I'll be there to MC. See you, Soleil.
Thank you. See you, Tim.
Thanks for being here, man.
Soleil, we'll see you soon.
And Jeff is that we will be talking with tomorrow is a big strategy fanboy like the rest of us. And then you asked me when I mentioned it on the stream that I was going there, you asked me about it. So we have a call tomorrow with Jeff, and he is trying to make it he wants to also put in some strategy panel. It is Bitcoin mainly, but he wants to put in also and have some of guys like us that do love to look into strategy and talk that whole investment thesis. Yeah, looking forward to have that call with you tomorrow, Tim, and Jeff, who organizes it.
Yeah, I don't think it's up on the Camp Nakamoto website yet, but I guess I'll just announce it now. I will also be attending, so I'm really excited.
There you go. So did you sort that out? You got it sorted out with Jeff, or you made the decision? Or yeah,
I'm going to be there, and yeah, I think we're going to have a lot of fun. I mean, it's fall time in New England, so I don't, maybe it'll be a little bit chilly. You just bring a sweater. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. It's gonna be a lot of focus on like doing some activities and doing some fun stuff together. It's not a straight up 9 to 5 conference. So well, there you have it. Both Tim will be there, I will be there, and the names that I mentioned. Discount code Anders10 gives you 10% discount on the website campnakamoto.com. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to hang out with you for a weekend, Tim, and the rest of the people coming there. It'll be fun.
Absolutely. And I'll just mention, since the end of February will be here before we know it, if anyone's considering going to Orlando for Strategy 2025, formerly known as MicroStrategy World, which the Bitcoin for Corporations conference is within that conference, you can go get your ticket, use KOTZ for a 20% discount, and or whatever the discount is. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of the True North crew there, and I'm sure a lot of people that tune into all of these.
Yeah, and yeah, please do that. You get yourself some discount and you support Tim that way. I wish I could make it myself to Strategy 2025. Is that what it's called? Strategy 25? It's so hard. Like all of us have to think every time we want to say MicroStrategy. It's like, oh, strategy.
Yeah, so it'll be the May 6th and 7th specifically is the Bitcoin for Corporations programming within the larger conference of MicroStrategy's corporate conference.
Yeah, and I was going to go. I likely won't attend because I have a big thing happening in Denmark the 10th of May, and I would like to not be too jet lagged. So it's been it's a little bit, but otherwise I think I'll be going to every single one of those going forward. Anyways, thank you also to you, Tim. It's great always to talk strategy with you guys. It's also a generic word, right? It's a little bit tricky, but it's great to talk strategy with you guys. And look forward to see you on the next one, Tim. Thanks for being here, man.
everybody needs a strategy. Bitcoin is that strategy. So thank you. Thanks for hosting. Always great to see you.
Likewise. All right. Have a good one. And thank you everyone for watching. If you like it, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe. And I am trying to do this. I am mainly doing this every Monday, MSTR Monday.